Good evening, everyone. First of all, I just want to say a massive thank you to the Council of Ex-Muslims Britain for inviting me to speak today, and more importantly for the work that this organisation is doing for all of us in Britain who are ex-Muslims, to encourage us, inspire us and unite us in these kind of safe spaces where we can openly interact and kind of have conversations with like-minded people. So yeah, on behalf of all ex-Muslims, even though she's not here in person today, I want to thank Mariam Namazi for starting this organisation and giving us a support system that we might not even know we needed until we were doubting or on the verge of leaving Islam. So Mariam, wherever you are, you're a true inspiration. And thank you to Ali here for having these continuous monthly meetups to inspire this sense of community spirit even through times like a pandemic. So thank you, Ali. And as I mentioned, the importance of safe spaces like this one, it is slightly disheartening and disappointing that we require such a level of, kind of to meet up in such a clandestine almost environment like this. The fact that we have to meet up in these kind of highly securitized settings, and the fact that before I leave to come here, my mum asks me repeatedly, like, are the people vetted before they can enter? It's just testament to the fact that, silence is not an option anymore. It's also testament to why what we say is so important. And when we do say these things, that the enemy that we're willing to take on is not just there to silence us, but to unapologetically behead us and kill us. So the fact that this is one of the oldest and most cosmopolitan cities, and we're subject to the same fears you would be in 7th century Arabia or modern day Iran, is testament to the nature of Islam and its very real and explicit call to violence for dissenters or for people who dare to openly question the morals of the barbarity enshrined in this desert ideology. The threat that we face while sitting here in 2021 in the heart of the democratic West is precisely why silence is no longer an option. The fact that in 13 countries leaving Islam is punishable by death, and the use of fatwas calling for the death of dissenters is precisely why silence is not an option. And I will move on to my actual experience with Islam in a bit. I don't really know how that's going to work, but
completely up to you.
Yeah, we can move on to my own personal experience. But what I would just like to say is, in general, as a roundup of women in relation to Islam, before we get into my story, is that at best in Islam, as a woman, you are property. Always the property of a male, whether it be your father, your brother, your uncle, your grandfather, or even your son at one point. Aisha, Muhammad's youngest wife, noted that women had been lumped in and categorized with donkeys and dogs, back in the 7th century. She knew that this was a disservice and an injustice to herself and to womankind in general. There's even a Sahih Bukhari hadith in which she goes as far as to say that I have not seen any woman suffering as much as the believing woman. Islam also accepts that the majority of women will be in hell. So if you're going to suffer for the most in this life, and then you're also going to dwell in hell, I genuinely urge women, I know there's not a lot of women here today, but I urge women to genuinely ask themselves what it is that Islam offers you. Women have no agency whatsoever, and this isn't a thing of the past. I wish it was, but you just take a look at the wali guardianship, the male guardianship system in Saudi Arabia. Up until this year, Saudi women were not able to travel abroad alone without a male guardian. And women under the Taliban now in Afghanistan are going to be subject to the same exact laws. This is not a coincidence. This is just what happens each time Islam rears its ugly head into the political systems, always to the detriment of human liberties and women's rights. Women in Afghanistan now will also be denied an education under the Taliban. So girls who are on the verge of completing their high school diploma, or women who are on the verge of completing their PhDs, suddenly have had their whole future snatched out of their hands. And I guess it's high time, given the plight of women in Muslim majority countries around the world, these things that we hear about, the acid attacks, the honor killings, even though I hate the word honor killing, domestic abuse, all of these things where the onus of honor and the burden of shame and upholding the family reputation is put on women. this entire concept is inextricably linked to the gender equality in Islam. And it's high time that we don't just allow this buck to stop at culture. We have to look into things that make us uncomfortable, push us outside of our comfort zone, because it's so easy to blame everything on culture. That's what most people do, and that's what most Western societies are doing when they claim Islamophobia. But culture evolves over time. It's religion and religious dogma that does not. It's stagnant. It does not allow for backtracking or bending itself to protect human values. This is exactly why we must call it out for what it is and put the spotlight back on Islam and its very tenets. This is why we must take the focus off the 5 pillars of Islam and focus on the pillars of enlightenment. We should push to educate our girls and boys from the very beginning, not in memorizing Arabic from an ancient book that they don't understand, but in things like the scientific method, freedom of expression, freedom of inquiry, and freedom from religion and dogma. If you're given access to education, which, by the way, is the basic fundamental human right of every human being, and taught to be equal from a young age, as well as to be taught to think critically, those girls that are raised in this education system will not silently accept their position of being likened to donkeys or chattel or dog, as Islam gives them, but they will give rise to a whole new generation of empowered women, free from the shackles of being labelled as inferior and deficient in religion.
The loo is all the way down there. Sorry. It's down right.
Okay.
So yeah, this will give rise to a whole generation of empowered women who are free from the shackles of being labelled inferior and deficient in intelligence, as Muhammad liked to claim that we are. But this is and can only be good for humanity as a whole. And this is what we need to aspire to. So that's just my small contribution to this discussion, just to move it along in some small way. But yeah, that's my little 2 cents on Islam and women at the minute.
We're going to talk about the channel you've just started. So.
Yes. So also, do you want me to start with the channel, or start with how I got to the point of...
how you got to the point of whole journey.
Okay, sure. So essentially, I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but I've just started my activism very recently with a YouTube channel called Holy Humanist, and it is aimed, because of where I'm coming from and where I see a lot of activism taking place, I think there is a massive gap in connecting with women, and women who are doubting or who are struggling to act on those doubts and kind of pursue them further. So my channel will be, sorry guys, a bit more focused and will take priority and give precedence always to women, and have a more women-centric feel to all the videos and conversations that I have. Because I feel like there are so many women who are not able to use their voices, and if I was to start a platform, it would be to enrich those voices that they don't have. But it's an open platform for discussion and just informed dialogue. So you can have a difference of opinion, you can have conflicting ideas, as long as we do it in a healthy, Socratic way where, you know, there's no bigoted arguments, there's not ad hominems being thrown around, it's not like a chest beating competition, it's just sticking to the basis of intellectual honesty. So yeah, I follow me on YouTube and on Twitter, Nuria K, but I'll be having quite a lot of cross collaborations with people. I'm looking to work with a lot more women as well to get our ideas across. But yeah, the day after tomorrow I'll be doing a live stream with Apostate Prophet as well, to go over my journey in depth. But yeah, basically that's it's a platform for open discussion. So we will have live calls as well. You're more than welcome to leave your opinion, call, comment. Please, if you know any women that are doubting their faith or, you know, having issues, whether it's anything related to Islam, please tell them to, you know, they're more than welcome to come on my channel, or also email me at holyhumanist@gmail.com, and I will try and connect with them on a personal level. Obviously, if someone's willing to share their story beyond that, then I'm also more than happy to do so. But yeah, just in terms of how I got to this, do you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So I'm sitting with all of you tonight, and I discussed obviously that it's beautiful but also sad. It's kind of bittersweet that we're able to meet like this, but it's also sad that in a city and time and in a year like 2021 we still have to meet like this. But again, while we are here, it's important that, like, you know, I'm sure some of you may be already aware of my story, so I'm not gonna like bore you with the details of it at all. But in terms of like just relating to the British Muslim experience, I do come from like a Pakistani background. So I come from a Pakistani immigrant family, and I'm the second generation to be born and bred in London. So I'd say I had like a pretty normative experience, what the genuine British Pakistani experience is, living in a kind of Muslim suburb of London, having your local mosque, having your grandparents living with the extended family, kind of being indoctrinated with Islam since you were born. Like, the azan is said into your ear, and then that's it. You're kind of just, you know, you're signed up for Quran classes before you even know what that means. So I lived that entire life. I had very conservative grandparents. We shared a household, and I fully believed that Islam was the truth. Like, that was the only thing I knew. That was my worldview. I accepted it as inherent fact. I didn't think there was anything wrong with the concept of it. And actually, in order to please my granddad further, because we have a really strong connection, I saw that how happy he would get when I would take an extra interest in going to Quran classes or the mosque, or taking an interest in, should I be wearing hijab now? When's the right age to wear hijab? I think it kind of spurred me on, and then I started getting involved in Quranic, like, they had Quranic recitation classes in the mosque. And I know this is more like the territory and domain of men, but even as a woman, like, we had competitions within the girls group, so I really tried to recite well. And even I'm only between 7 and 9 at this point, and even then I tried to know what I was saying, so I'd always keep a little book of translations with me, which was really, it was the weirdest translation to understand, which is why I think I never fully grasped what the Quran was saying in that day and age. But I tried my level best. I believed it with all my heart. And then a couple of years down the line, we moved to Saudi Arabia, and that's where I need to backtrack a bit. In London, I did eventually start wearing the hijab, and I did kind of, for the time that I was here, I'd go to school in hijab, and we had religious education, RE, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. I would, like, you know, volunteer to demonstrate how to pray, demonstrate what it is that the Quran says about Islam, that Islam propagates the fact that killing one person is akin to killing all of mankind. I spewed all of that. I was a champion for Islam. And then we moved to Saudi Arabia, this is very ironic, because most people would think that you would get more religious the closer you get to Mecca and Medina and the holy land of Islam. And I was so grateful that we were, because, you know, it's such a privilege. Like, people save up their whole lives to go and do Hajj. It's like, that's one of the pillars, the foundational pillars of Islam. If you're able to, you should do it. And I just felt so privileged that I could just pop in on the weekend and do Umrah and come back home. Like, it just seemed like I'm so blessed compared to Muslims who maybe give their entire life savings to do this once, and then you have rich Muslims who do it over and over again. And you know, anyway, so I was still a teenager. I moved to Saudi Arabia. I was in a very international school, so I was suddenly exposed to people from all over the GCC and all over the world, so different branches of Islam as well. I met people in my school that were Lebanese, and they were Druze, and they followed parts of Christianity and parts of Islam, and that was mind-boggling to me. I didn't understand how. I was like, you're so lucky, you can just pick and choose. So, like, if I want to be Christian on this day, but then I want a glass of wine, I can just not adopt Muslim values for that day. Is that how it works? So I was just learning these things, and obviously they were seeping into my mind. And because Saudi Arabia is so heavily governed anyway by the state, as an Islamic state, I had to wear an abaya every time I left the house. I couldn't be seen interacting one-on-one with a boy outside and in a restaurant or in a mall. You know, you have to take care of these things. So I didn't really feel the need to project my Muslim identity, because it was so heavily put on me anyway, that I stopped wearing the hijab. I focused more on sports. I kind of gained much more of a liberal attitude, but still holding Islam as like the ultimate truth. I would go to Mecca on the weekends. really, really like feel that sense of, I don't know what you'd call it at that time, but spirituality, for a lack of a better word, at that time. And then, but at the same time, like I'd hear about Friday when my dad and my brother would go to the mosque to read Jummah, that they've come home, but if you stay, there's beheadings taking place, that you can stay and watch if you want to. And they read out the name of the criminal and his crime, and then they'll amputate his hand or his foot or whatever it is he's done. So you start to hear these things, but also get desensitized to them at such a young age, because even in Riyadh there was a place called Chop Chop Square, which is infamous for beheadings, and you just kind of acknowledge that this is part of the country you live in, but you think this is just a Saudi distortion of it. This is just Wahhabism playing out, and I'm just like some expat kid just trying to live my life. So those two worlds are always kind of like in your mind, but you just put them to rest. So I would see the Mudawwa, the religious police, kind of like annoying Westerners and telling them to cover their heads when they had no obligation to, really. And they would try and fight and say, I don't believe in it, but out of fear of being arrested or whatever. It is still Saudi Arabia. Like Jeddah, where I lived, was a liberal city, but you're still in Saudi Arabia. So, you know, there's certain, the Mudawwa, the religious police, take precedence over even normal police. So you wouldn't really put up much of a fight. But then Saudi Arabia obviously eventually did become suffocating, because I was a young teenager, and then as you grow up, you can't drive. There's no such things as cinemas. You can't interact with you can't live a normal teenage life as you would here. And I'd always come back here. England was my reference point, so I always had like this clash of civilizations in my mind. Then I did move to the UAE with my family, and I was like, this is perfect it's okay, it upholds Islamic values, but it also gives humans their individual freedom and liberty. The only thing the only problem there was that I'm still Muslim, so I'm susceptible to Sharia law. Whether I choose to identify as Muslim or not, that can never be questioned. By virtue of your name, you have a British passport, but my name is enough for them to know that you're Muslim, and therefore we can put Sharia on you. That's non-negotiable. But I could drive, I could go to the cinema, I could hang out with my friends, I didn't need to wear an abaya. So all of these things again added to my liberalism, and I kind of was searching for, 9/11 had happened by then, and all of these kind of, the war on terror and Islam getting its bad name, and me just trying to justify to myself that I don't really subscribe to an ideology where somebody thinks it's okay to fly a plane into a building and kill civilians, but how do I justify my position? And I think at that time my parents were also awakening to this globalized mindset, and they had books on the bookshelf of like Sufism and Rumi and all this. So I think I kind of found shelter in this idea that God is love and love is God, and just like the esoteric mystical version of Islam, as opposed to like this hardcore dogmatic version. So even as a Sunni Muslim, I kind of was like, I don't really even want to be associated with that after certain events. But then, yeah, long story short, I came back to England for university, and I studied a module of Islamic law at university, and I've written essays. So weird. I've written essays like defending like some of the Islamic ayats and what they mean for women and stuff. But that just shows the level of indoctrination, because I believed it so heavily. I was studying law, and I remember just before our first lecture, this guy came up to me, and for the Islamic law lecture, he was like, I'm not a Muslim, but I'm just really intrigued by this. But I knew he was a Muslim before, because he clearly looked like just looked like me. And so I was like, that's insane. What do you mean you're not a Muslim? Like, how? Okay, fine, you don't agree with certain things, or you could be a different type of Muslim, but what do you mean you've cut off completely? And he's like, yeah, I just don't believe anymore, but I'm here to study this shit. Like, what? And I was like, oh, okay. I was slightly offended, but I had never ever come across anybody in my life that had told me I was once a Muslim and now I'm no longer a Muslim. I did not even know that was a concept that was possible. So then I went to university, I did the whole course, I defended Islam in those modules. But then when I moved back to the UAE as an adult, I got married in 2015, and shortly after the honeymoon, the marriage kind of unraveled. There was different levels of like emotional abuse, financial abuse. When it got to the point where I feared physical abuse, I kind of separated myself and went to live with back in my father's house, which according to Islam is my actual mahram if it's not my husband. So I thought that the UAE legal system would at least accept that fact. But yeah, so it turned out that obviously because I wanted out but the other party didn't, I had faith in the UAE being like a modern progressive Muslim country, which kind of puts a liberal face onto the world, that we've got nightclubs, we've got everything, we've got hotels, we've got shopping malls, we've got everything you want. So I put my faith in that legal system thinking, okay, this is just it will be, either we'll come to an agreement amicably or it'll be a bog standard divorce settlement as it is here. But that's where I went very, very wrong, because the UAE basically, if one party is not on the same page as you, the UAE legal system has these loopholes where you can pick up these instruments of almost ancient Sharia law. The law that was put on me was called Dara Zawjiyya in Arabic, and it basically refers to the disobedience of the wife, which I'd never heard of before. But when I actually looked into it, it still operates in Egypt to some extent, but it's pretty much not used anymore by any of the GCC or Muslim majority countries. But if you have a lawyer who knows very well how to like trap a woman and keep her trapped or like corner her, this is a law that they will use because it's so open-ended, because disobedience can mean me saying, no, I don't want to do that, to me leaving the house without your permission. Like the scope is huge, which I thought used to be a problem, but now I realize the problem is the fact that disobedience exists in the first place. But again, as a Muslim, you don't have that like widened mentality where you actually believe you're equal in the first place, you know? So there were all these kind of internalized things that I was working through anyway. But yeah, again, long story short, when I was trying to get out of that, I still believed in Islam, and I still just believed that this law was nothing to do with Sharia and nothing to do with the Quran. And this was just these men kind of using and distorting the system to my disadvantage. And I believed with all my heart, so we went through like Islamic family counseling, and even then that can be manipulated and hijacked because you don't want a divorce, or one party doesn't want a divorce, you could flip the narrative. And he was saying all sorts of things like I was possessed and I was, you know, like under black magic and all these kind of things, then that's why I wanted a divorce. And obviously these Islamic clerics have to accept that as fact. So they say, okay, we'll go back and like, you know, have a week, both of you pray 5 times a day and do everything Islamic, and then maybe you'll have a change of heart and change of mind. Whereas all of the whole concept that we understand and recognize here in the West, where if you're being stalked, if you're being harassed, if you're in fear of your life, if you're any of these things, they will act to ensure your safety. None of those protocols were heard in this Middle Eastern country, where I thought it's still progressive enough for women to have certain rights. They just weren't considered at all. In fact, they could not even understand the concept of mental health or anything like that. They would understand possession before they understand mental health issues or personality disorders. So yeah, basically when things got really intense from the police's point of view, when they were actually really trying to enforce this law, which essentially says that we can arrest you and forcefully take you back to your husband's house, and you can't leave without his permission, unless now you just straight up file for divorce and like forgo all of your rights. Which thankfully in my situation, just being educated and having a supportive family, that wasn't a problem, which I can see it would be a problem for so many other women, which is why I speak, because they're not all in this position. But because I didn't give a crap about that. I was like, just give me a divorce. But even that was so, the process can drag out. Islamically, they will take away any of these rights that they say that they give you. In my situation, I think it's called nafaqat. Correct me if that's the wrong word in Arabic, but it is literally like maintenance for all the months that you've separated from your husband. But even that was so demeaning in the form of like makeup and like, you know, like, yeah. Literally the divorce statement was like, here's this many dirhams for makeup. I was like, are you I'm literally talking to you about personality disorders and you're giving me a little payment for lipstick. What? Anyway, but yeah, so basically before I even stayed in that country, when I realized that they're trying to get me in whatever capacity possible, because besides the divorce case and the Da'wa Zawjiyya, the harassment and stalking obviously led to like him finding out where my new place of residence and all of that kind of stuff. So my new job, my new office, everything was compromised. And they were putting loads of criminal cases on me to the point where it got unbearable. And every day I'd wake up to like black magic-y stuff outside my door. Like it got really, really bad, to the point where when the police would call me and say, at 10 p.m. on a weeknight in Dubai. I've lived in the UAE for a long time and I know how the system works. And they would call me at like 10 p.m. and be like, you know, just come to the station. And I'll be like, but why? And they're like, well, we'll just tell you when you come. And obviously as a British citizen, and like my friends who lived there as well, we were like, you never ever have to go with the UAE police if there's just male police, and if it's between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m, you're under no obligation to go. And I knew that. And I also had heard so many stories of British expats getting, you know, absolutely like lost in the UAE legal system, rotting in jail for months, having to like reach for propaganda methods for like the British government to have a plea of call to get them home or whatever. So I was like, if they are going to take me to the station for whatever reason, I want the British embassy to know where I am from the get-go. But when they did try, obviously I resisted, and I said that I'm not currently with my mahram, and I won't be coming there until I can come with him. He can escort me there, and the British embassy needs to know that you've taken me, because you've taken me on such crazy grounds with no proof, but now I'm signing documents in Arabic that I also have no idea what I'm signing. So it's just a trap. Like, the entire thing was a trap. And when they eventually did ask for me to like hand over my passport, I was like, okay, that's it. Like, if I give them my British passport, I'm like, how am I ever going to come home? So when they did ask for that, I called the embassy and I said, look, there's a Da'wa Zawjiyya put on me, which is going to hold me against my will and send me back to a house where I genuinely fear for my life. I'm meant to be under my father's protection, even according to Islam. And thirdly, they're trying to charge me with all kinds of ludicrous charges of theft and adultery and all these things, where if they take my passport, I could be held indefinitely. Like, they don't have a clear system, they don't have impartial justice. And I knew that, and I just wasn't willing to give that up without letting British authorities know what had happened to me. So the man that I spoke to on the phone, obviously I don't know his name even, but what an angel he was. He was like, I cannot, and I this is fair, they cannot give me legal advice in that situation. It was a completely Sharia matter, and I fully understand that. But he said, in other words, he's like, I can't give you legal advice, but I kind of will give you solid advice. Just leave. Like, if you've got your passport in your hand, don't go to the police station. Get to the airport, fly out, and come back home where you have rights. All he said is that you know what these kind of charges can do to women, and you know that they can hold you for reasons that we wouldn't even contemplate in this country. And I literally shut the phone and I was like, let's just go straight to the airport. And I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky, and I acknowledge that I have come from such a privileged background where I had a job, I had money enough in my account to get me on a flight to Baku. I just needed to be out of the GCC airspace, get me on a flight from Baku to London. And again, still holding Islam in my heart this entire time, thinking this is just men who have messed up. This is men trying to trap me. This is not what Allah or divine eternal law would ever subject me to. Like, Allah would have my back and say, you know, like, women have the right to live a prosperous, healthy life, like free from abuse and fear and all of that kind of stuff, like an equal partnership. But it was only kind of when I got to the UK and things settled down and I came to terms with what I had just run away from and what had happened to me, that I actually was like, okay, Da'wa Zawjiyya, what is this and where does it come from? Where does this notion of disobedience, it's called nushuz in Arabic, where does it stem from? And Sharia, it's Sharia. And then I obviously had known Sharia derives directly from the Quran and Islamic sources. So I went straight back there, and for the first time, I didn't have in my heart this like wall where I was expecting that this book is miraculous and it's going to blow me away and it's got divine beauty and wisdom in it. But alternatively, I was like, what the hell does this book say? like, what in this book could justify that? Surely there's nothing. Surely that's just a out of context thing that they've used. And then I went and I read the Quran properly for the first time in my life in my native language, in English, with all the possible translations that are available on Quran. I didn't even touch, like, you know, non-Islamic or Kafir websites like Quran.com, with all the translations that Muslim scholars have approved. And then it was just the status of women, the violence and the hate speech that just I could not stomach. I read it over and over again, trying to justify it to myself in my head, thinking, okay, come on, but there's a reason that women are slightly inferior. Maybe we are emotional, I don't know. Is it like are we, do we forget in court testimonies? Do we need a man to be like, I don't know. Is this hate, is it worth calling Christians like scum of the earth and Jews like, is it? Do I hate them that I don't? Like homosexuals, all of these things that they're just forbidding, and God is so hateful. It didn't sit right with me. And then I was obviously always doing like outside reading as well, and the claim that like something to be violent and divine, just that can't be in the same sentence. And the Quran was full of absolute violence. And then I looked into Muhammad's life after that, because there's layers to leaving it. So the Quran, I was like, okay, I can't just leave it based on this. Let me actually see what the Prophet did in his life. Because we were taught that like his sweat smelled like roses. He stopped little infant girls from being buried alive. He, you know, all of this. So I was like, okay, surely Muhammad was not even advocating what the Quran says. But I was so wrong. I went into the Hadith and matters just got so much worse. And again, I wasn't even focusing on weak ones or ones that were contentious. I was like, what are like the Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, the most agreed upon hadith that people are saying this is a genuine chain of narration that's undisputable. Women were just, it was even worse for women. You know, you're getting beaten to the point where you're greener than the cloth you're wearing. As I mentioned, Aisha said, believing women suffer the most. She was picking like apart the Prophet's reasoning for why have you likened us to donkeys and chattel? Why have you made us equal to them? So all of these things, I was just like, oh my gosh, even Prophet Muhammad in his lifetime treated and dealt with women in this manner, which is completely reflected in the Quran. So these two things are completely in agreement. And that's really where Islam started disintegrating itself for me. I couldn't lie to myself anymore or think of this man as being the most perfect, eternal example for humanity. With just some of the stories, you know, that I heard, like the story of Girfa getting split, her legs being tied to two camels and her being ripped apart on the orders of the Prophet. For that story was enough for me, for this man to be kind of just not elevated anymore in that position. He just kind of fell. And I started seeing this man as not this perfect saint of a man. Like, he just honestly became like an egomaniac warlord with this expansionist agenda, who was extremely misogynistic and treated women as like the booty of his endeavors. And that's what we're still suffering from today. His words and his actions and these recordings in the Hadith and these verses that have come down in the Quran so conveniently to take care of Muhammad's life and give him the best possible life, access to as many wives as he wants, access to divorce wives and get better wives, to be able to marry prepubescent girls. These things were kind of just absolutely shocking to me. And I mean, I didn't think I needed to ever go back and forth with imams and scholars for them to tell me reasons why that is supposedly okay. I just thought, like, it's high time. I trust my mind, I trust what I'm reading. This is genuinely a cult which is entrapping women, giving rise to situations like child marriage and child brides, things that we're seeing today. And I can't sit here and do what I used to do as a Muslim and blame it on culture anymore, because I've seen the evidence for what it is, and this goes beyond culture. This is deep-seated into our psyche from Islam itself. But yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
As I say, I listen to you, there are so many similarities with my experience. I guess we all go through the same experiences, right? Leaving Allah behind and then Muhammad behind. And with every step, we have new rush of emotions and to deal with them. Because if we go through this whole journey of leaving Islam, you speaking from a woman's perspective, I know, like, for men, sometimes it can be easier because in Muslim societies, men have the financial independence, or because it's a patriarchal societies, men do tend to get away with many things, not necessarily all the time, being ex-Muslim, especially in countries like Pakistan or Bangladesh. But how do you see the differences between men leaving Islam and women leaving Islam? Let's start with doubting. Like, how for men to doubt and for women to doubt Islam, how hard it is?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting because, and it's a really scary thought as well, because had I not gone through what I had gone through, I would have carried on being, what I thought was a progressively moderate Muslim. So I do everything that I want to do, but I still hold Allah close to my heart, and I would feel guilty for things that I do that are not in line with Islam. But it's only more experiential, if that makes sense, like based on my experiences that actually made me delve into the sources more. And I think with women, it is things that they are actively presented with. For example, like if you are forced to cover up, a lot of families are liberal, and like mine was as well. They were actually it was so weird. They were weirded out when I wore hijab because I put hijab on at 7. And I was so proud of it, but they were like, are you sure? Like, you shouldn't be doing it if you're this young. Like, it's very hard to come back from this. And I thought they were crazy. I'm like, do you guys not want to go to heaven? Like, what is wrong with you? You should all be doing this. And so because they were liberal, that was okay. But had something like this not happened to me, I don't think I would have ever known or accepted that Islam as an ideology can be so dark and the status that it gives women. Also maybe because I was always like connected with England, I knew that it doesn't really affect me here. But I think for men especially, from a philosophical point of view or whatever it is that causes your doubts, I feel like the journeys are very different to begin with because they stem from such different places, but you obviously end up in the same place. So I think with women a lot of the time it is if they are at the behest of Islam, like divorced or married off or forced to have children or certain things, that would really lead them to doubt what their role is in life and where that comes from. But a lot of the guys I've spoken to have had a lot more kind of philosophical and scientific based issues relating to Islam, which makes them believe more.
Yeah, that's true. And we're coming to the question.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, you're right. And you mentioned like the indoctrination into Islam starting right from your birth. Like, even before birth, parents know the child is going to be the Muslim. It's even in stats and included that way. And policing of women within Muslim community.
Yeah.
Because there is a saying in Pakistan where I'm from, and I repeat that quite a lot. They say, if a man goes astray from the right path, a man goes astray. But if a woman goes astray, the next generations go astray, because that means that just shows you the extent of how much they want to control and police women, because they're scared it's not just one person that's going astray, it's going to be the generations to come after that. And that mentality, unfortunately, is still present in the West within our communities. What do you think communities here need to be doing better to get rid of that? Is there anything the state can play a role in, or education?
I definitely think it would be, if the situation is like that behind closed doors, which it usually is for most Pakistani British families that I can speak of, especially in an extended family setting. I mean, let's just say I live with my parents who are extremely open-minded at the moment. If I was living with my grandparents, I would not be sitting here today, and I would not be saying these things, because you're just, like you said, the woman is, the onus is on her. She's going to have children, she's going to give birth, she's going to go to a different home, and it's her offspring that in Urdu they say that there be in English, like the the upbringing you give your child is it should be within the confines of Islam, as you say, which is obviously very heavily conservative, and women don't really speak their mind as much, and you're kind of there to serve your husband's needs, and you understand the status quo that your husband goes out and he's the breadwinner and he provides, and you should be taking care of all of your duties. And that's just reinforced. It's reinforced by the way they live their lives, their community, everything they watch, everything they do. And even our own women from our older generations can't handle us younger women speaking out. They feel extremely violated and threatened, and that we've kind of lost. We've gone down the drain and kind of lost our morals and everything that we were supposed. And they blame it on our mothers. Like, my mother's main concern is that if my grandma ever finds out what I'm doing, she'll turn around to my mom and say, it's because you're a bad mother. And I think she's the best mother, because she said, follow your where your mind and your heart takes you. And I love her so much for that, but that's not what the Islamic or these patriarchal and heavily conservative Pakistani cultural families encourage you to do at all. And I think, like you said, it's education, it's the state, it's fully assimilating in the country that you are. It's trying to get rid of beliefs that you're indoctrinated, like leave your beliefs at home. Like, when I was a Muslim living in England and I'd walk past a pub, my granddad would reinforce that this is a place for devils, or this is a place, or like those Jews or those Christians. And I internalized all of that. And then when I came to university and I was experiencing London as an 18-year-old myself, I was come across a Jew or a Christian or a homosexual or whatever, and I'm like, I don't foster or harbor that hate towards you for some reason. I'm just supposed to, but I don't, because you're a good person. So yeah, it's definitely just, I think, mingling with people, education, being exposed to new ideas, traveling, not completely being subject to the views that are propagated at home, and yeah, just kind of thinking outside the box and being brave enough to kind of challenge orthodox views that are at home, which can be extremely hard in families and cause a lot of tension, but yeah.
And you've mentioned, like, at one time in your life, you weren't even aware that leaving Islam is possible. I guess we've all been there, because, as you said, the indoctrination starts right from the birth, and then because it's an all-encompassing religion, it becomes your reality. And when you do question and eventually leave that reality, it is a scary prospect, right? Do you see a change in that trajectory? Because visibility of more and more ex-Muslim, especially ex-Muslim women now speaking out a lot more. You see a change where people are finding it a bit easier to speak out or to be okay with themselves about apostasy?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think with every single new person that comes out and says, yeah, I'm an ex-Muslim and I've left Islam behind, all it does is add momentum and gives courage to people who are doubting and, worried to come out. I was in this position at one point in time. I was literally watching people like you. I was watching CEMB discussions, and I was like, there are people who think the same way. Like, there are people who are saying it openly and they're not afraid to, and what's made them say it? But just firstly, the security in knowing that I'm not alone in the way I think. When you first realize Islam is fake or it's a complete con, you genuinely, based on the virtue of the people around you, think, am I the only one that's realized this? And where do I go from here? And it was only online that I found my outlet, and I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. There's people out there who also think this. And then seeing organizations, CEMB, ex-MNA, North America, and then all those individual YouTubers who were coming out as well. Like, I lent heavily on the Master Arab and Sharif Gabir because I really wanted an Arabic perspective. Before I left, I wanted to know, like, am I actually, there's last things when you're clinging on, you're like, do I leave, or should I actually do this? So they were all very, very helpful. But again, like Maryam Namazi, me as a woman, being, there's a lot of men, but me as a woman being able to see another woman like Maryam Namazi standing up in a UK university, taking on the likes of those, like, I don't know, Pseudo Ali Dawa, Muhammad Hijab types who are trying to intimidate her and trying to throw her off course, which is extremely, I don't think I could, like, that's extremely intimidating. and she's there and she's standing up for what she believes in. She did a debate at Oxford as well. For me, seeing women really helped give me the nudge. Like, I had obviously interacted with like YouTubers, even ex-Muslim UK TV, the person behind that, which again, they were all very much encouraging me to come out. Hara Sultan really encouraged me to come out as well. But again, it was like, okay, you're all men and you're saying it from a safe space. So the more and more women that I saw were just fighting back and asserting their rights and saying, no, we're not going to take this crap anymore, really helped. I think the internet is great to give people who are doubting that courage. And there's so many of us now, like people, when they list the ex-Muslim channels out there, and it's becoming a really nice long list.
It is becoming a long list. It's good. And so many different perspectives, which is important, because again, it just proves ex-Muslims aren't a collective bunch. They're all going their different ways and doing from their own. And one thing you mentioned, like, I remember my first exposure to ex-Muslims, and it was a shock.
Yeah.
Because even though I'd been an ex-Muslim, and it was, again, Maryam Namazi on BBC, and I was like, okay, it is possible. Like, there are people out there. And then it's a huge relief. Then again, it doesn't get any less scarier to come out. The first time you come out and see others, I still, like, the anxiety I felt the first time I came out to see other ex-Muslims, just outside that door, it was, oh, wow. It's quite crazy.
Oh, God.
It's quite crazy.
Yeah. I remember even when I was like, look, I'm in England. I'm pretty safe here. Like, I should be using my voice if I can, but is it worth it? Should I just kind of live my life? And I emailed Maryam, and I was like, afraid to go public was like the subject of the email, and her response was just so like uplifting, and I was just like, you literally are, especially for women, you know, like when you do see someone, we are a minority within a minority, so we have a few people we can like latch onto. There's Jan Hirsi Ali, who said a lot of stuff. There's Nawal Sadawi, who I really value. She's Egyptian, and she's kind of like shed light on a whole generation of Egyptian women who are subject to Islam and been deprived of education, and, you know, almost living in abject poverty because of Islam and facing domestic violence every single day. But these people championed, like Maryam Namazi's championing one law for all. Yeah. That was like, I mean, it sat so right with me, because as a woman, you see the situation from both sides. Like, I was put into a corner because I was religiously married and not secularly. But here, people are secularly married, and then they don't get, they're religiously married here as well, but they don't get the secular protection that they deserve. And Maryam's, just her general message, I was like, yeah, we need more women to be saying this, because there's no one there to talk about women in Islam who have been a victim of Islam, but they are also still Muslim. And if ex-Muslim women have to do that, or ex-Muslims in general, we will still fight for their rights. We'll just also highlight how crap your ideology is at the same time.
Before we open up for questions, just one more thing about the backlash. Because men, yes, they do get backlash, but women tend to get more backlash when they speak out against Islam. Is that true in your case as well?
Yes, I was very prepared for, you just have to like grow a thick skin, and you were like, okay, now I'm just like out there on the internet and subject to anything anyone wants to say. But to be honest, from my close circle, which I hold the most near and dear, I don't really care about randomers on the internet saying things, that's fine. But my actual close circle have honestly, which is testament to, I think, a global upbringing, a good education, an ability to tolerate disagreements. They have been so good to me. I'm honestly telling you, I had to stop my parents from coming here. They would have genuinely been excited to come here. They're like, we're open to like different points of views. Not we're ex-Muslim, but like we're open to hearing things. And I was like, maybe not the right venue for you guys. But even my friends, a lot of my friends are Muslim, and I was very, very scared to tell them that I am now starting to speak my truth, which might hurt you. And I expected friendships to be lost in the process, and I expected myself to be cut off, especially from my friends back in the Middle East. But for some crazy reason, I don't know why, they've all got VPN, and they're watching this as their nighttime entertainment. Yeah, which has been really, really good, because especially again from the women, most of my girlfriends are messaging me saying I had an issue with that, but like I never looked into it that much, or I put it to the back of my mind, or I'm literally just getting messages saying, you know what, like, thank you so much either way, because I'm learning. Like you're making me want to go and learn more. So that's actually been a lot better than I anticipated. I don't know why I'm not getting like the brunt of, I don't think the Muslims have discovered me yet, because it's about to come. I've just got such nice responses so far. My immediate family is like very supportive, but I guess when things maybe get bigger, or if my name goes out there, I'll wait for the death threats and the hate mail.
Yeah. The important thing is that support structure. We all need it.
Yeah.
It's such an important thing, and I'm glad you already have questions. Yes, you have a question.
I just remember what I was going to say at the time.
Sorry.
I think I was just thinking, you asked about the doubting phase and the difference and how that might feel as a man compared to a woman. And I was just wondering if in some strange way it's actually harder just within your mind internally to doubt Islam as a man, because if you are an Islamic man, that can have many benefits for you.
Yes.
So is that quite conflicting, because you basically have to be a little bit empathetic to women, basically. If you're going,
you have to have an ounce of respect
the reasons for leaving Islam that Nuria is
good
talking
men in
about.
this room.
Yeah, but for real, right? Like as a woman, it's kind of easy to see, like, whoa, I'm such a kind of victim in this religion. Why would I subscribe to that? But as a man, it's like, well, it does me a lot of favors.
That is true, but that's no. In my experience, that's not Islam worked for me. For me, the first and foremost thing was its perfection. And like the zeal was built on my foundation for life. Right? When I started questioning its perfection, the rest of the things didn't really matter. Yeah. For me, it's not perfect anymore. Muhammad's not perfect anymore. That means nothing Islam has said wasn't like anything Islam has said didn't mean to me as much after that. And like I was already living here in Britain when I started questioning. In Pakistan, yes, I can see like it would have been near impossible for me to question Islam because of all the things you've mentioned. Like my sisters would bring me a glass of water on my table whenever I needed it. They cooked, they served me, and I had everything. But I was already independent. I was already doing things for myself. So I guess I was lucky enough to not have that in my life anymore. That's why those like the facilities of being a man in Islam.
Because when you're trying to stand up and speak, you've got like two fronts you have to fight, and you have to convince people towards feminism and also away from Islam, which is obviously very difficult for people who have those beliefs held so strongly that they are Muslim, and also that patriarchy is the way that is correct.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I see that as well, because that's why I'm surprised, because as a woman, it's so easy for you to realize that Islam is not in your favor. It's at the expense of you. You are, like I said earlier, you are at best property in Islam. It's not, if anything, it's anti-women, right? Like everything in the Quran is working against you, against your every right that's awarded to the men is not awarded to you in the same capacity. And you start to see that, and it's so much easier to, as a woman, then that was enough for me. Like I didn't even need to delve into, I did anyway, because I didn't want to check out of this religion for nothing. Like, is this enough for me to leave, or are there other problems? I just needed to know that my concerns were warranted. But as a woman, I felt enough disgust. Like the Quran itself has enough misogyny to establish leaving Islam, that itself. But again, for your own, like your mind's playing tricks on you, and you're like, oh, I don't know, like let me check everything, and you go back, but that just helps your cause as a woman. But as a man, yes, you've got 4 wives, you've got sex slaves if you want, you've got 72 virgins in paradise.
Yeah,
it's if you're
for you to
that way
doubt
inclined.
It's so easy as a woman for you to doubt, right?
Yeah.
But to speak out, then it's when it's more difficult to be a woman.
To speak out, it's definitely more difficult. Actually, there was I saw this going around on Twitter, and I haven't like verified it, but apparently in the Hanafi school of thought, the ruling is that an apostate of Islam, like somebody who leaves Islam as a male, should be killed, but there's no ruling on a woman because it's not expected that she would ever rebel against Islam or
No,
speak out
I think
against it.
there is a window of 3 days for women. She should be beaten every day and given a chance to repent in her school of life. Give her a beating the first day. So
I'm
you
sure that will
repent.
change your mind instantly.
And then after that you can kill her.
Oh, you can't.
It's not like you let her go.
I was like, why 3 days? They love 3 in Islam. There's like a whole thing with 3.
7, and of course 72.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
Islam is so beneficial for man, so let's think again.
Yeah, you guys reconsider.
That's the thing about free thinking and critical and rationalism is a bug. Once you get it, it's really hard to let go of. It's really, really hard to let go of. That's why I don't understand. I've seen people who become ex-Muslim and go back to Islam, and I can never understand that.
Those are the people you need to worry about the most. Like,
Yeah.
how has your mind been expanded and
Yes.
open to such new, amazing, and you've gone back and chosen that?
Yeah. It's find it amazing. But yeah, rationalism, it's really hard to let go of.
Yeah. I agree.
Ali, I just wanted to ask you, are there individuals who have actually gone back to Islam? I'm not aware of any.
There are some, but they've. I mean, it's not a nice thing to say or to undermine them. But there are some troubled individuals.
Are there?
Yeah, even then, when they were ex-Muslims, they were troubled,
Right.
and their conduct wasn't always
Yeah,
like
obviously.
up to
So there
standard.
should be some sort of litmus test.
I
test
mean,
their
it's
sort of
fine.
loyalty
People have their
to, like,
religion.
say something negative about Muhammad, and
I'm scared now.
and say
Yeah,
how they
just-
react.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm scared because like one of the thoughts that when I was a Muslim is that if you ever leave Islam, you're so troubled. Like in your head, you're so troubled, and you
Yeah.
sounded like that. Like if someone goes back from being an ex-Muslim
Exactly,
to
that's what I
Islam.
didn't want to say. Yeah.
Because I think like it depends on your reasons for leaving Islam. Sometimes people leave Islam just because they were with a group of people that left Islam, and they just thought, that's correct. But then they really thought they needed the faith and spirituality, and sometimes people don't decouple spirituality from Islam.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, like you need sometimes, like some people need spirituality, some people
Yeah.
need,
There is a
so
huge
they would
divide.
always think, okay, like Allah is the one, and then I would always worship him.
Yeah, completely. And I didn't mean to like portray everybody who goes back is the same way. It was just a couple of individuals that I know. Yeah.
Also, because in the situation you're describing, they've left Islam not for a genuine, like, out of their own cognitive, like, reasoning, right? They've just left it because, like I said, whoever in their group left it. So the thing wasn't, like, genuine or virtuous to begin with, so it's really easy to kind of be like, actually, I still want to hold on to that. But if you found genuine reasons to be like, I want to separate myself from this ideology, that's usually when you stick it out.
I guess there is still a void left, right? Especially when you leave Islam and become an atheist or be atheist. There is that void of like directing your gratitude to something.
Yeah.
That you don't have that because when you're Muslim, you just say Alhamdulillah, it's fine, right? It doesn't have to do. But when you're atheist, you don't know who's the hamd is going to, right? And that's a scary void. And some people make their peace with it. Some people go towards spirituality, which is fine. I've seen people who go to Christianity, which is fine. It's everybody's personal journey. Any other questions?
So when did you met Maryam and Mazi in person? Like when you saw the ex-Muslim in person, physically?
You're gonna meet Mariam? Ask Mariam on that.
No. Question.
I've literally only met her once, very briefly. But I remember the first time I was trying to go to an ex-Muslim meetup.
Oh,
Actually, I don't think I've been to one before. I tried to go, and I was so nervous. Like I got to the meeting place. I think it was Camden Station at the time, and I was like, how do I find these people? Because it was so, the location wasn't disclosed or anything. So I was standing at the station and I was like, kind of making eye contact with random people outside the station
And
without.
brown person.
Yeah, I was like, and it's just a look that like, are you? But we can't say, but are you one? And I was doing that for like a while. And I was making eye contact with this guy, and then I realized after 10 minutes he just pulled out some like physics book, and he was there, and I was like, oh my god, he's definitely not ex-Muslim here for this meetup. And I think I just went home and I tweeted, I think it was Sadia Hamid at the time, and I was like,
Yeah.
Sadia, these events are so, I was standing outside, I don't know what it was, and I was so nervous, and I felt like I was committing such a big sin, because I'm like, who can I speak to and say, by the way, I'm an ex-Muslim, do you know where the meetup is? Like, you trust no one. So I've honestly, I think the last event in this bookshop is the first time I actually was in an ex-Muslim meetup. I hadn't been to one before.
Oh, sorry, the question was, how is it like meeting Mariam?
No, actually, the first experience to see the
Ex-Muslims,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Actually, I saw Mariam Namazi in Conway Hall.
Okay.
Alright.
There, and I didn't go inside. I just to the door and looking so nervous, and my heart was so beating.
Yeah.
So when we,
then I saw similar faces like Pakistani faces. Oh, Paji, you are Kafir, you are Kafir. Yes, I am Kafir. Yes.
There should be a kafir handshake or something, you know, like a little sign. Just, are you one? Yeah.
They were eating hands. They gave me something. I said, let's try. It's tasty. Oh, I eat that one.
they give you Coke.
Yeah, Coke.
Oh, wow. What a welcome.
Right, guys, if there aren't any questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you one more question. I'm just curious, you know, did, at any stage of your journey from sort of Islam to atheism, did you consider sort of becoming a Christian? I became a Christian first, and then, you know, when I met Mariam Namazi, I left the church, you know.
All right.
Yeah, that's interesting, you know. That's
She saved you
2008
from-
when she launched Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain.
Oh, wow. So are you currently a Christian?
No, I was a Christian.
Oh, you were,
After leaving
okay.
Islam, I became a Christian.
Right,
And my
right.
hatred of Islam started quite early when I was like
think you
14 or
have to turn
15,
on the
Sharia
battery.
law and that sort of
Yes,
thing,
there
and
it is.
arguments with my parents.
Right.
And then when I was a student, I just wanted to
Turn
leave
it
the
on.
institute.
It doesn't have any.
Yeah.
It was too much. I didn't suffer personally because I had my schooling in India, then I came here for my uni. But I was concerned about, you know, what's going on in the Islamic world. And it's something unacceptable. You can't live like a, you know, civilized person and still sort of not say anything against Sharia.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was professor of Islamic studies, and he used to say, yeah, it's not right, but you need to keep your mouth shut and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So in the end, it was too much. And then I left and became a Christian. I was baptized in the Church of England.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was a member of Church of England for 8 to 9 years, and then it was too much for me. I started criticizing the Old Testament and a lot of that crap, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't like it. So
And then you met Mariam Namazi?
yeah, I met. Then she launched. I was working in the Foreign Office then, and then one of my colleagues told me that they were going to launch an organization.
Oh, right.
And I met her very briefly, but then the Foreign Office they were not very happy in getting involved with it. And then I served in Pakistan very briefly, you know. They had a public interest. They didn't want me to sort of go there.
Yeah. So you
That
became
sort
a
of
Christian after leaving Islam.
Yeah,
Do you think about going to Christianity
Yeah.
or any other religion?
Honestly speaking, I didn't, because I was so shaken by what what I believed for so long and how much of a lie I believed it turned out to be, and the hold it had. So because you're almost so scarred and so traumatized by the intensity of this truth that actually might not even be true, and it's actually horrible. It's abhorrent. It put such a level of distrust in me that I was like, I would never, ever, ever be fooled or taken as part of an ideology like that ever again. If there's not evidence for something, if there's not actual proof that I can see and substantiate with my eyes, or it follows logic and rationale, I will never believe it. And with Islam, when I was kind of thinking about, so like obviously we live in 2021 now, and to even say, you know, like Adam and Eve, and Eve was created from the rib of Adam, you sound like a Muppet saying these things. And I was like, if I attach onto any other religion, even if I was to assume that Christianity or Judaism were corrupted and Islam was the perfected message, even maybe that subconsciously made me think, okay, those two aren't worth looking into. But if I did want to go back to any of those, I'd have to accept some of the basic same stories and principles that Islam has, which were already way gone for me. I didn't believe in the creation myth. I didn't believe in heaven and hell as it's mentioned in these religions. I didn't believe in Jesus sacrificing himself for all of us. You know, I didn't believe in his miracles of, you know, curing lepers and stuff, because the same way I don't agree that Muhammad flew on a winged horse, I also don't agree that Jesus cured the blind or whatever. Like, it was a similar thing. So in terms of leaving one Abrahamic faith, I was able to dismiss them all. And then I was just wary of ever having any god or sky daddy or being part and parcel of any ideology like that.
A lot of people do it for social reasons, because the moment my parents and my sister and others, they had left Islam, they stopped talking to me. So I was quite lonely, and then the church provided me a lot of support.
That's true.
And,
There is that.
you know, it's not like Islam. You
Oh,
know,
it's
see man
definitely
running,
better,
you
yeah.
know,
I guess it's-
mosque 5 times a day.
Yeah.
It was more interesting.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
You're one step out of it. It's
Yeah.
one step better.
For most people, when they leave Islam, I think atheism just becomes like a natural conclusion,
Yeah.
because Islam is the abusive ex who ruins any new people for you. You're not trusting anybody else.
For me, literally.
We have Googled them. There is no any.
Thank you so much.
So I guess if there are more like informal chats and stuff, we can get a drink across the road and